Okay, friends, very good morning to all of you joining from the Americas, and good afternoon to those participating from Europe, and good evening to my friends from Asia, specifically India, who have joined this evening today. Thank you very much for joining. It's a pleasure to have you again in one of our events. I, Bipindra, on behalf of Law and Society Alliance, welcome all of you to this another webinar on a very contemporary and an important topic. We are today discussing the issues connected with Khalistan separatism, terrorism, and the present fad with referendum by the Khalistani activists living in the North Americas in particular. In fact, we have been reading jokes on the internet about how Canada will become the Khalistan at the rate at which the Khalistani movement is conducting a referendum all over the place. They are also trying to uh, fan flames, and that is being done by vested interests. When I say vested interests, I am clearly indicating at Pakistan. Our panelists today will show you from their presentations how Khalistan is nothing but Pakistan's destabilization playbook, and also how it is a project of Pakistan itself. Before I introduce the speakers, please allow me to present to you a short 20-page report on this Khalistan referendum that's been going on currently in Canada at this point. This has been prepared by one of our, researchers. This attempt at a referendum has been going on since 2020, and this short report by Law and Society Alliance, we are releasing today, has been prepared with some interesting facts that I thought should be highlighted before this informed audience. Just bear with me. I'm just going to, upload that particular report so that you can go through it. 1 second, just hold on, please. I'm going to share that slide. Okay, are you able to see my screen where I've made this presentation? Anilesh, can you just confirm if you?
Yeah,
Great.
I can see that.
Okay, so this is the report that has been prepared. I'm just going to present a few facts about this. Okay, Khalistan referendum. This is the report that we have prepared. How Pakistan has been fanning this all this while. We have divided the content, to show you how Pakistan has been backing the Khalistan movement all along, and how the chronology of Khalistan referendum 2020 has been all this while, and also how social media has been propagated. Have been used to propagate this idea of this referendum, and how this entire exercise is an anti-India narrative. So this is what we are, trying to show you by this report. The report basically talks about how, we see a lot of propaganda material that has been around on Khalistan that have been put on the public domain, which explicitly gives evidences that elements and actors within Pakistani establishment, either directly or indirectly, are responsible for this referendum propaganda. In fact, on October 15th of 2015, a report in Daily Times, which is a Pakistani-based newspaper, talks about, written by Zibati Hashmi, headlined Pakistan involvement in the Khalistan movement, mentioned that the former ISI chief, late General Hamid Gul, told in an interview to a local television channel that Sikh separatists used to purchase arms from their contractors based in Pakistan. However, it was only with the help of Benazir Bhutto in the late 1980s that the Khalistan movement itself had to take a backseat. So there is a link to this video of the interview of General Gul, which can be accessed from this report itself. So in another video, General Mirza Alam Beg, has mentioned that Pakistan pushed the Khalistani movement to create more problems for India. Again, we have provided a link to that particular YouTube, video, which can be accessed. And again, in September 2020, of course, the report by McDonnell Laurier Institute, which is a Canadian think tank, it's titled Khalistan Project of Pakistan. This report was written by one of our panelists, Mr. Milewski. He had called in the report that Khalistan is a geopolitical project of Pakistan, which not only threatens the national security of India, but also presents a grave threat to the internal security of Canada. So this is a 20-page report. We also, have put the chronology of the Khalistan referendum movement since October 2007 and how the Sikhs for Justice, which is a banned proscribed organization in India, with its headquarters in Lahore, has been, but based the main figure of this movement is based in New York in the United States, but it has its headquarters in Lahore. The referendum headquarters is in Lahore. How they have been, trying to fan this referendum. We also show in the report the use of social media like Twitter, Facebook, and how there are a lot of ghost accounts which are especially trying to amplify this propaganda. And most of these ghost accounts are based in Pakistan, and they are usually they are created just a week before the referendum or 10 days before the referendum, just to do propaganda on the movement itself. And they usually have just about zero followers entirely, and they follow some 10 odd key figures. So that is the modus operandi of the Pakistani handles. Similarly, there are also ghost accounts on Facebook, and also some very specific accounts like some key figures in Pakistan who have been fanning this movement. Here we show some examples of how Shafat Shah, who is a retired Lieutenant General from Pakistani Army and who also served as Ambassador of Pakistan, and also Talat Khurshid, another retired major from Pakistan Army, who have been trying to propagate this Khalistan movement and referendum. They also raise Pakistan pro-Pakistan slogans and anti-India posts on Twitter and other Facebook and places like that. And also there have been several toolkits that have been prepared by Pakistan Army for this movement. You find that on Twitter there are a lot of handles, particularly from Pakistan, posting the same content time and again, which clearly shows that it's a very calculated movement, fueled, funded, and supported by Pakistan. So also some very key figures, very popular figures inside Pakistan have also been trying to rope in. They have been roped in to propagate this Khalistani propaganda. And interestingly, I mentioned earlier that ghost accounts are created. This is one ghost account where some person, again, this is again a fictitious name, Gurneet. She uses a, display picture. This person from Pakistan uses a display picture from a Pakistani clothing line, to show as though it is a real person, but actually they picked up a photograph from a different, clothing line account and posted it as though it is their own, and it's again a ghost account. Basically, this is all done to propagate the idea. It's all, what do you call it, engineered by the Pakistani handles. So similar, very similar. This exact, tweet has been done by 2,614 people. So that is the. May I ask our participants to just mute themselves so that there is no disturbance, because we are recording this event and it's also a mark of respect for the people who are speaking. Yet again another account where a very similar thing has been posted by 1,531 tweets, and 92 unique handles have done this kind of a tweeting. So this is what we see on Twitter. A similar propaganda has been done on Facebook also by Pakistani accounts. So this is what we are showing in this entire 20-page report that we have prepared in Law and Society Lens. One of our researchers has prepared it just for this event. So we have released this today. It will be available on our on our website very soon, maybe later today. You can go and access this, and also how this entire movement is an anti-India narrative. So several tweets, several Facebook posts, we have given examples. You can go and check it out. And I believe the Indian government needs to take serious note of this. The Indian government has already warned, or rather asked Canada to stop such propaganda activity, anti-propaganda India activity happening in Canada. We have Mr. Terry Milewski who has joined. Thank you so much. I was just introducing the event to our participants. I was just showing one of our reports which we have prepared specifically for this event, Terry, where we have mentioned one of your report also in it actually. So this is what I was doing at this moment. Okay, so this is the current scenario as far as the Khalistan referendum is concerned. And as I mentioned, the Indian government has already told Canadian government to prevent such anti-India activities. And now, since both our speakers are here, let me introduce our speakers. The first speaker is Mr. Terry Milewski. He is joining us today from Ottawa in Canada. He is a career journalist and is now retired after 4 decades of work as a correspondent for the CBC TV News. Mr. Milewski has visited India several times and has interviewed India's then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, who herself fell victim to Khalistani terrorist bullets in 1984. In 1985, Mr. Milewski went to Ireland to cover the Air India aircraft bombing by Khalistani terrorists, and has followed that incident, that terror attack, and the stories that are, that emerge from that dastardly incident for the last 35 years now. Mr. Milewski in September 2020 wrote and released that report that I mentioned, which was released by the Canada-based McDonnell Laurier Institute, titled Khalistan, a Project of Pakistan. And he has also written a very interesting book called Blood for Blood, 50 Years of the Global Khalistan Project. Here is it. I hope you are able to see this book. This is a fantastic book. I recommend anybody who's interested in the Khalistan movement and the history of Khalistan and all that should buy this book and read it. It's a very important book in this. And it's a very important contribution by Mr. Terry Milewski on this subject. So our other speaker for the day is Mr. Anilesh Mahajan. Mr. Mahajan has been a journalist for nearly 2 decades and is currently serving with India Today magazine as a senior editor. I hope I got your designation correct, Anilesh.
The deputy editor.
Yeah, deputy editor. I'm sorry. He got promoted recently. He's a deputy editor now. He has previously worked as a journalist in Punjab with the Times of India and has closely followed the Khalistan movement, the terrorism and the separatism associated with it. Mr. Mahajan has traveled widely, including to the United States and Canada and the United Kingdom, where the remnants of the Khalistan movement are still active, and has closely watched their activities and efforts at reviving the Khalistani demand, though this demand has not got any popular support in Punjab itself. With these short introduction, I now request Mr. Terry Milewski to make his presentation. Terry, the time is yours.
Well, thank you, and I apologize for the technical problems this morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can clearly hear you.
Oh, all right, okay. There's something wrong with the desktop app. Anyway, I thank you for the invitation. I'll just make a couple of short comments, and any questions, happy to entertain anything you want to ask. The first thing I'll say is that there is there's a disconnect between India and Canada on this topic. Canadians are constantly asked, why aren't you cracking down on the Khalistan referendum? Why are you allowing this to happen? Why are you allowing troublemakers to degrade the relations between Canada and India? How can you let this happen? These people are terrorists and so on. And on the Canadian side, and this is not a party thing, it doesn't matter whether you're liberal or conservative or who's in government, they all say the same thing. Say, wait a minute, India wants a liberal democracy to abolish freedom of speech. These people are committing no crime. It is no crime in Canada to walk down the street with a yellow flag and say Khalistan Zindabad. It's no crime at all. They are perfectly free to hold a vote. They can vote on anything they want. It's a peaceful event. What on earth is India talking about? Do they seriously expect Canada to abolish freedom of speech? And on the Indian side, the reluctance to do something is a serious problem in relations. They always bring it up, and they say that Canada is failing in its duty to India to please India by doing some unstated thing. Well, what is that thing exactly? That's one problem we have to face. On the other hand, we also do have a domestic problem within Canada, which cannot be denied, and that is the refusal of Canadian politicians to use their own freedom of speech. Because it's not enough to say, well, the Khalistanis have freedom of speech to carry their flag and shout Khalistan Zindabad. It's not enough. What is required, of course, is for Canadian politicians to stop pandering to the Khalistanis by looking the other way when they do this abominable thing, which they invariably do, which is they say, oh, we're all about democracy and free speech. We just want to have a peaceful vote. That's democracy. You can't fault us for that. And by the way, we're going to name our referendum campaign office the Shahid Talvinder Singh Parmar Voting Center. We're going to name the next campaign office in Ontario. We're going to name that after Shahid Harjinder Para, and so on. They are using bloodthirsty, mass murdering terrorists as the poster boys, literally as the poster boys. They put large pictures of them on the posters for their referendum campaign, at the same time as they're saying it's all about democracy. So why are they campaigning in the name of, in the case of Talvinder Singh Parmar, many of your audience will already know, of course, where I'm going with this. Parmar is a famous name because he is the worst mass murderer in Canadian history. He was the mastermind of the Kanishka bombing, as it's known in India, the Air India bombing, as it's known here in Canada, the explosion of Flight 182 on June 23rd of 1985, which killed 329 completely innocent civilians who had nothing to do with the Khalistan cause whatsoever. But Parmar didn't care, blow them all up, including, by the way, 33 Sikh passengers and crew who died with the rest on board that flight. So there is I've been critical of the Indian side, and this probably won't change, for expecting Canada to magically abolish freedom of speech in Canada. Not going to happen. Get real. You're going to have to put up with free speech in this country. And I have also been critical of the Khalistani side for this far worse sin, in my view, of glorifying terrorism and terrorists. Harjinder Para, who I mentioned before, just to clear that up, was a Khalistani thug from Brampton, Ontario, good Canadian boy, who was part of a group of thugs who beat up a fellow Sikh who approved the Longowal Agreement back in the day. I won't get into the details, but they just about killed him. He survived, but they just about killed him. And then Para went to Avtar Singh Brahma's Khalistan Liberation Force terrorist training camp in Pakistan. And then he graduated to partaking in the Khalistan Liberation Force death squads, which killed famously in a single weekend about 70, again, innocent civilians in Punjab, and again the next day across the border in Haryana. So, they do this routinely, by the way. This isn't some aberration. They've already named their campaign center after Parmar. They've done it again. They've named another campaign center after Para. They've done that again. Gurpatwant Singh Panun, the standard bearer of Sikhs for Justice, which is organizing the referendum, has put out his own video. One is called I Am Dilawa. Well, now you will remember that name too. Many Indians will remember that name. He, of course, was the suicide bomber who blew up and killed the Chief Minister of Punjab, Behant Singh, in 1995, along with, by the way, 16 innocent bystanders. They don't seem to care about the bystanders. Who else gets killed at all? So on and on they go, holding up terrorists as the heroes of their movement, the models for Sikh youth, while telling us simultaneously that they're all about democracy. So this is the environment we're in now. We're on the brink of another round of voting in Canada. And the same dispute is happening again, with the Indians saying Canada must crack down and the Canadians saying, sorry, freedom of speech. Meanwhile, this largely unnoticed sin, this abomination by the referendum proponents of glorifying their so-called martyrs, glorifying basically mass murdering psychopaths, this also continues. And I suggest that it's incumbent upon Canadian politicians to saying, I'm sorry, if you're going to do that, if you're going to have posters of these so-called martyrs, these mass murdering terrorists at your Gurdwara, we're not going to be coming to your Gurdwara looking for votes at election time. We want nothing to do with that. And we think you should stop it and take those posters down. And we don't hear that nearly enough. So I'll stop there just as introductory comments and entertain any questions, any other discussion you would like to have.
Thank you, Mr. Milewski, for those very incisive comments there. Before I move on to the next speaker, I just want to introduce the audience to the McDonald-Laurier Institute report that Mr. Terry Milewski had authored. Just bear with me, I'm just going to share it on the screen. And I've also posted the link to that report in the chat box. Anybody interested in reading that report, please go back to the chat box and read it. And I've also posted a link, Amazon link, to the book that I just mentioned that Mr. Terry Milewski has authored, Blood for Blood. You can go and buy the book if you're interested in buying it. Just bear with me, I'm just going to introduce you to the McDonald-Laurier Institute report. Okay, this is the report that Mr. Terry Milewski prepared in September 2020. It's called as Khalistan, a project of Pakistan. This report, is divided into, these contents are available, these chapters, starting with the bombing of the Air India flight while it was flying over Atlantic Ocean near Ireland. It starts with that and talks about all the Pakistani support that has been going on to this Khalistan movement, and also different characters who are involved in this entire Khalistan movement episode. So I recommend that you go and read this very strongly. Please go and read this report. It has some very interesting insights. So please do go and read it. I'll leave it at that. I'll allow the audience to go and read this report. I've shared the link already. So, and if any of the audience has any questions to ask either of the speakers, please post it on the chat box so that I can take it up. Also mention the speaker's name to whom you are addressing the question. So we'll take it up after the second speaker of the day makes his presentation. Now I request Anilesh Mahajan, could you please take the mic and make your presentation, please?
Thank you, Bipin sir. Thank you very much. This project Khalistan is not a two-dimensional or a one-dimensional project. It's a multi-dimensional project, and every state, every country has, whichever is the stakeholder, has their own dimension added to it. Just for this discussion's sake, I can tell you that there is one perspective in Canada, there is one perspective in Australia, New Zealand, one perspective in US, one perspective in UK, another perspective in Germany, And obviously, since Pakistan, we have a very difficult relations. They have a different dimension to this Khalistan project. And even if we consider it India, in India also there are multi dimensions to Khalistan. If you cross Punjab, there is a different dimension to it, and in Punjab, it's a completely different project. Uh, but if I can tell you and stitch together certain things, you can look at the way various governments play their roles in keeping this ghost alive. Because I can tell you from my own experiences in last 20 years, this movement has died in Punjab. There is no taker. Only there are few fringe elements who make noises. But people at large, they don't subscribe to this view. There are certain issues which are more. Uh, because there are some issues. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Anilesh, I've been taking care of that.
Yeah. Uh, so there are certain issues which are present in other states as well, like of federalism, like of more rights to the states. But people try deliberately to mix it with the Khalistan sentiment. And if we go back and try to understand the original concept of Khalistan, which was drafted first by V.S. Bhatti in pre-independence era, it was completely a different concept. Included cities like Multan, Lahore, Rawalpindi, Sialkot, and some parts of Amritsar, some parts of Jalandhar, not the modern day Indian Punjab. Uh, So, this concept now is largely, is a very vague project. Now people are using this project to do their own commercial deals, propaganda, commercial, now this entire commercial thing. Pakistan shelters 10 terrorists who who had played some bit of role during the militancy days in Punjab. They are in Pakistan. We are getting regularly, their pictures. People are showing us that and we have also seen from our eyes whenever we went to Pakistan, they are there in their gurdwaras. So 5 of them, they are directly now involved in smuggling. So they are bringing the heroin from Afghanistani traders, and they try to into India. And from the Indian network, they supply it to the different cities of India and then bring it to the North Americas as well. And in North America, especially in Canada, many of the Punjabi gangsters, they are colliding with them. One of the guys who was living in Lahore, Lakbir Singh Rode, who was cousin of Bhindranwale, Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, the terrorist who was killed during the Operation Blue Star. His son Bhagat Barar is living in Toronto. He is running taxi business. He is running music business there. Plus, he is also anchoring many of the drug activities. So I'm sure the Canadian police and Canadian intelligence is also aware of many of these things. And now Canadian government needs to understand issue is not about freedom of speech. This is a serious law and order situation for Canada. People, because of their rivalries, they're killing each other. They're using the gangsters. They are not only using gangsters in Canada, but they are also using gangsters from Mexico. They are using gangsters from across the border US. They are using gangsters in Punjab, getting many of the Canadian citizens eliminated through those gangsters. We have seen one of the kabaddi players who was a British national. He was killed here in Punjab, and there are links to the Canadian gangsters as well. So now this situation is not limited to the freedom of speech, which was there, a decade back or 2 decades back, when they were just making propagandas in the gurdwaras and people used to hear, and they used sometimes they used to react, Many of the times they never used to react, but they kept the pot boiling. And now many of the youngsters, they are getting involved in the crime activities, and these criminal activities is harming more to the Canadians or Americans than to the Indian nationals. Then there is a guy called Gajendra Hijacker who is also living in Lahore. His family is in Germany. So what he does is that he procures drones through his family members and other accomplices who are living in either in Germany or nearby in Switzerland or France, brings them to Pakistan, and then uses those drones to drop drugs, do drug smuggling in India. So there are 6, 7 Pakistani sheltered Khalistani militants who are doing smuggling in Punjab. Paramjit Singh Panjwar is there, Lakhbir Singh Rode is there, Gajinder Hijacker is there, Rinda is there. So there are 5, 6 of them. And this money is also coming from those monies which are collected in Gurdwaras of Canada, Gurdwaras of England, Gurdwaras of Australia, Gurdwaras of US. And repeatedly, Indian government is telling the Canadian counterparts and the other governments that you should start auditing these money from where the money is coming to Gurdwaras and where are they spending this money. And a large chunk of this money is going to Pakistan, and they are funding these criminals, and these criminals are actually harming the interest of Canadians and Canada. So now this is not limited to a propaganda or somebody who wants to do a internet thingy, or they just want to keep the pot boiling. You look at the activities of Khalsa Aid, you know they should be at least made accountable to the money they are getting. Australian government is worried about their activities. All criminal elements are getting involved there. Then US government is a bit worried. England is worried. That's why this guy is not getting that much of government support in England. The only government which is supporting Khalsa Aid is Canadian. There is some coherence which is required in Canada as well, where they can actually see these activities and put a break to it. Whenever Indian government speaks to the Canadian intelligence and Canadian government, we get a roadblock that there is a freedom of speech, people can collect money, and since these are religious and charity organizations, we can't ask them where they are spending the money. But this is not acceptable to people who want world peace. There is a requirement that we need to know that where this money is coming from, where what are all sources, and their money, and how they are taking this money to Pakistan, and how people in ISI using this money to fund these 6, 7 elements which I have already mentioned. They are doing smuggling on behest of ISI officers. And this is actually bringing in the terror money and drug money into the Khalistan movement. And now we also suspect that there are some Chinese yuan which is also coming into this Khalistan thing. And despite all these efforts, and I can tell Bipin sir, despite all this money, all these elements, Khalistan movement is not picking up in Punjab, only because this movement doesn't have the ethos of Punjab. Because in Punjab, people like to live in harmony, peace. Uh, if we go back during 80s also, people were more agitated with the elements uh, who were trying to kill people. And that's why within 10, 15 years this whole movement finished, and the anger was largely against the invasion of Golden Temple. And those emotions were used by these Khalistanis, and they were aided by Pakistani intelligence to flare separatist demand of Khalistan, which at that moment also was a demand of a very minuscule people. And many of these minuscule people, these fringe elements, they only moved to Canada and England, as well as to Germany. At the time, we all know that Germany was having a liberal face, and especially West Germany. And they got some of these guys as were given the political asylum. So now this movement is more dangerous for these countries rather than Punjab. In Punjab, yesterday also there was instance which people are trying to link it with Khalistan, but it's largely a very isolated case where two people of different communities they fought. But even if one killing or two killings are happening, they are targeted killings, and these Khalistani elements are using only criminals to get this thing done, and we are trying to fix it. But you all understand that India is not that efficient. But maybe we can have some plugs in the Western world, which is better developed. They have a better system, and probably the liberalism becomes a bit controlled, and we also see that many of these criminal elements they are only using drug money, but now actually impacting the life and the safety of their own citizens. Vipin said, I'll be happy if any of our people in the audience have some questions. But largely, these are my initial remarks. And if you guys have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Yeah, thanks very much there, Anilesh. Thank you for those comments. And I believe Terry Milo would have something to say about what you had to say on Canada. But before that, I think I will want to show the audience another very interesting report that has been published on Khalistan last year in September 2021. So just bear with me. I'll just share it with you first before we go to the question answer session. Okay, so I believe you are able to see my slide. Okay, this was published by Hudson Institute, and the topic and the title of this report, which is a 45-page report, is called as Pakistan's Destabilization Playbook, Khalistan Separatist Activism within the United States. So this is another report that has been prepared, and Dr. Aparna Pandey is the primary author of this, but there have been others also like Dr. Christian Fair from Georgetown University and others, including Mr. Hussein Akani, who was earlier the ambassador to the US, Pakistan ambassador to the US. He is currently with the Hudson Institute. They have prepared this report, and this widely covers the Khalistan activism in North Americas, and also talks about how the US government has been ignoring the kind of law and order issues, the kind of activities, the link between the Khalistan movement and the Kashmiri separatist movement in the United States, and issues like that. I would again strongly recommend our audience who are interested in the subject to go and take a look at this particular report, where it talks about the Khalistan organizations cultivating Pakistani state support, and also how there is a very interesting similarity between the Kashmir movement fanned by Pakistan and also the Khalistan movement fanned by Pakistan. So it's an interesting report. I would strongly recommend all of you to go and check it out. I'm going to be posting the link to this report in the chat box very soon. You can use the link to go and study the report if you're interested. Now moving on to the questions, I have there are a couple of questions that the audience have posted on the chat box, but I have my own questions. My first question is directed to Mr. Milewski, who has been very kind to participate early in the morning from Ottawa. Thank you so much. And the question is, I would like to understand from you, Terry, what is the general support that the Khalistani movement gets from Sikhs who are settled in Canada, and also the non-Sikh Canadians? How do they view this, the kind of support that the Khalistani movement gets from non-Sikh Canadians in Canada? If you could just give us a perspective on that, please.
Well, it won't take very long to answer that question because there's very little interest. I mean, you may find this surprising, and some of your audience may be surprised to know that you could scan the entire Canadian media ecosystem, television, radio, print, if there is any print left, and find no mention I don't mean just small stories. I mean no mention at all of the Khalistan referendum. This is something, it's an issue which has plagued Canada for decades. It's an old story. Unless you're involved, people are not taking an interest in it. It's not on the television news. It's simply not an issue. People are ignoring it. Now, the second thing to be said is that they may be right, considering, as Anilesh has already alluded to, the extremely low level of support anywhere for the Khalistan referendum. And perhaps we should just take, if you'll allow me just 30 seconds, just to mention that while they're appealing to democracy by saying that will let us have our vote, it's totally fair to have a vote. We've been having votes in Punjab for more than 30 years since the armed insurgency for Khalistan died out in the early 90s, 92, 93. I mean, let's remember that, people in Punjab have been free to vote for separatists, for the splinter group headed by Simranjit Singh Mann, his splinter group of the Shiromani Akali Dal. They've been free to vote for them for 30 years. And Mann himself won a national seat, I know, recently, the first time in 23 years. He managed to get himself elected. And let me just put a couple of facts on the table. In the most recent election, in a Sikh majority state, 58% of the population of Punjab being Sikh, in that Sikh majority state, the only such state in anywhere with a Sikh majority, in the last most recent election, Mann's group got 2.5% of the vote. 2.5% of the vote, and they have a 58% majority. It doesn't suggest that there's very high level of support. In the previous election, and this was, by the way, in a pretty good year compared to the last election in 2017, when they got, get this, 0.3%, not even a half of 1%. I mean, in that election, none of the above, which is a category in these elections, none of the above did much better than the separatists, who won no seats and a tiny fraction of 1% of the vote. And then in the more recent election, they increased their vote to 2.5%, still got no seats. And the BJP, get this, here's something to consider for your audience. Get this, the BJP, a Hindu nationalist party running in a Sikh majority state, got 3 times as many votes as the separatists. So you really, it's difficult to exaggerate the microscopic nature of the support for the Khalistan idea that exists in Punjab, and that's the vast majority of Sikhs on this planet. 16 million Sikhs, probably more than that now. But they voted in their millions, time and again, decade after decade, for fervently anti-separatist governments headed by fervently anti-separatist Sikhs. So that's something we need to remember about the worldwide support, and why Canadians, I suggest to you, might be onto something when they turn the page, they've changed the channel, they don't follow this, they don't think this is real at all.
Right. Thanks, Terry, for that perspective. Anilesh, I have a question for you. You did mention about, which Mr. Terry also, Mr. Milewski also referred to, about the lack of support. And he also mentioned about the Simranjit Singh Mann winning an election in 2020. Earlier this year. Is there some kind of a what do you call it as have people got bored with that entire Khalistan idea in Punjab? What is the scenario at this point in time? The AAP party, which is now in governance in Punjab, probably had some kind of a tacit support from the. Is that so? Is that your assessment also? Because that's been talked about and bandied about in the media for quite a long while now. So if it yeah.
Sir, the thing is that Simranjit Singh Mann's election had a multiple dimensions to it. One was that at that time there was a singer, Sidhu Moosewala, who was killed in a gang war. Not a gang war, but perhaps attacked by a gang. Um, so there was an anger because people were feeling that people are still feeling actually in Punjab that Aam Aadmi Party is not being able to control the law and order situation, and it is giving free hand to the fringe elements. Secondly, in that belt of Punjab, the federalism and sentiment for federalism is very high, and they want more rights for the states. And for a chief minister to hang on a vehicle with another chief minister, getting more prominence, that picture hurt the sentiments. Thirdly, there were a bit of Sikh radicals who were raking up the issue of release of those 22 militants who have already completed their sentence. And they didn't want to vote for the original Akali Dal, which is headed by Sukhbir Badal. And fourthly, there were Hindus who wanted to defeat Aam Aadmi Party. So they all voted for Simranjit Singh Mann, and they saw that this is the only guy who has a credible face, who can, win the election. And they all started backing him. And roughly 30% of the electorate, which earlier used to vote during the Sangurur by poll, they didn't come out of their homes. They didn't vote. So the voting percentage also came down, and these factors they played the role. And there was hardly a Khalistan factor, which influenced the voting. This gentleman has a tendency of raking up this bogey, but when he went to Parliament, he kept his that sword also out. He took oath in the name of the Constitution. He took oath in the name of keeping Indian sovereignty intact. So he also kept this Khalistan bogey out of the parliament while taking the oath, because he also knows that there are only a segment of voters or segment of Punjabis uh, who has some bit of sentiment linked to Khalistan, not all. And if you see Punjab's demography, Punjab's 40% population is Hindu. And if we see caste wise, roughly 30 to 33% of Punjabis are Dalits, and another 32% are OBCs. And OBCs plus Dalits, they don't want Khalistan. They see that this is largely a Jatsik phenomena. If you see most of the terrorists of Khalistan movement, Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, Lakhbir Singh Rodhe, Paramjit Panjwar, all of them are Jatsiks, and they are not being liked by other communities because they see Jatsik as a more dominating community. That's why even if you see the early migration in 80s and 90s are also of Jatsiks. So this community dominates Punjab's polity, but now shifts are also happening because people are fed up with this Khalistan bogey.
Right. Thank you, Anilesh. Just to clarify to the audience, Law and Society Alliance is a non-partisan organization. We don't support any political party, and we are not opposed to any political party. And also that we don't have any sort of a caste, religious, or any bias. When we talk about the caste, when we talk about politics, we talk it in quite an academic term, just to understand the kind of phenomena that's happening. Just to clarify, so that nobody gets any any ideas about where we stand as a Law and Society Alliance. I have another question to Mr. Milewski. There is this interesting thing that you mentioned in your report, that MLA report, about the map of Khalistan that the Khalistani activists propagate, tells a story on its own. If you could just, tell us what is it, what is that story? That will be quite interesting to listen. Yeah.
It is an interesting story. I'm glad you raised that. Briefly stated, there has been a rather empty history of explanations of what exactly is Khalistan, where would it be. There have been various maps, but there doesn't seem very much attention paid to it. And they've tried to fill that gap most recently, almost exactly a year ago, on October the 31st of last year. That, of course, being the anniversary of the assassination of Indira Gandhi by her Sikh bodyguards. The map you see on your screen is what it used to be. That's the Republic of Khalistan as it used to be until the end of October of last year, when it expanded from that. That map, however, does make the same point. It is a map that stops at the Radcliffe Line. What's the Radcliffe Line? Of course, that's the partition line between Pakistan and India, made by a British bureaucrat in 1947. And it's interesting because although there are very expansive claims, you can see there not just on Punjab, but also Himachal Pradesh, parts of Rajasthan, Haryana, of course, and in this version, including New Delhi, all of this would be taken into the new state of Khalistan. Then the new map, I don't know if you have a copy there, that was put out by Sikhs for Justice in launching its referendum campaign in Britain, makes further claims and goes even further into those various other Indian states. And now the capital of the new Khalistan is supposed to be in Shimla. But, and here's the point, and this is what I think you're getting at in your question, not 1 inch of territory in Pakistan is claimed for the new state of Khalistan. Now that's interesting because so much of Sikh history and culture derives, of course, from lands and holy shrines which are now in Pakistan. Why do they not claim? I mean, they openly say this, they want to reestablish the Sikh nation as it existed 200 years ago in the Sikh empire of Maharaja Ranjit Singh 200 years ago, with its seat at Lahore. They're not claiming Lahore. Okay, well, what about the birthplace of Guru Nanak? He's only the founder of the Sikh nation. They're not claiming Nankana Sahib. They're not claiming that either. Not 1 sliver, not 1 inch of Pakistani territory is claimed. You have to ask, why is that? It's apparently very important not to upset the Pakistanis, who, of course, have been the enablers, protectors, and guarantors of the Khalistan movement lo these many years. And I'll just, if I can just add one suffix to that, bear in mind that I've talked a lot already about Talvinder Singh Parmar, the mastermind of the Air India bombing. Bear in mind that he fled Canada after the bombing. And where did he go? To a safe haven in Pakistan, where he operated for the last 3 years of his life as a gun runner, getting guns from an ISI-sponsored gun runner inside Pakistan. And when he died on an expedition inside India, there were 5 gunmen with him, 2 cars, 6 men. One of them was Parmar. 2 of them were ISI agents. Interesting, considering that the Pakistani government confirmed their identities, said that they were completely innocent tourists. Tourists, by the way, with a rocket launcher in their car and a thick wad of US $100 bills, traveling heavily armed inside India on long expired visas to visit their families in India who did not exist. They had no families in India. So these were 2 ISI agents, jihadists, making common cause with the Khalistanis, again, for purposes of their own. Again, they're thinking about Kashmir, not Khalistan, but Khalistan, of course, would cut off, if it ever existed, would cut off India's land access to Kashmir, another core interest of the Pakistani state. So I mentioned that just to set the strategic environment, which I don't believe has really changed very much in the years since Parmar was killed in October of 1992. So sorry, I went on a bit too long there, but I just wanted to put that in its historical context.
Thank you, Mr. Milewski. That's a very interesting perspective there. Uh, Anilesh, I just had another question for you. You did mention about the various perspectives that exist on the Khalistan movement itself, in different nations. So one of our participants, Mr. Dhruv, Dhruv Shyam Vimal has asked, if is that because there are different definitions that each of the nations have when it comes to terrorism, terrorist organizations, and terrorist ideology? If you could just touch upon that. And I would also ask you to address one more question on who are these people who are actually going and voting in these referendums that have been conducted till now. I think one is happening tomorrow somewhere near Toronto, and I think Mississauga is the place where it's happening. And one earlier happened near Ontario sometime in September, and again some referendum voting happened in the UK. So who are these people who are voting? If you could just address these two questions, please.
See, there are multiple countries who have different political asylum or citizenship rules. Accordingly, these definitions of Khalistan changes. Secondly, the other dimension which adds is the people who have migrated there, and uh, initially people who have gone to Germany or to the European countries. Uh, these people were sponsored by Pakistan. They landed up there, and largely these are the families of terrorists, not the terrorists themselves. In England, many of these terrorists went, and they took shelter there. And there is a huge Punjabi population also in London and other parts where they got settled. Many of them, because of the time, they their anger or their emotions for Khalistan that phased out, and they have gelled into the societies there. So government of India has also opened up doors for them if they want to come back or visit their relatives or friends. They are open. Many of the terrorists who had been to these places, they also came back. Dr. Jagjit Singh Chauhan used to be one, Vasant Singh Jafarwal another. So there were people who came back. Uh, then Canada and US, there is a peculiar situation there because there are political asylum rules which still exist, and Canada is still open. So many of the people who are going to Canada, they use Khalistan as a tool to show that in India, because they demand Khalistan, so Indian government is putting more pressure on them, or there is lack of freedom to speech, so they want to come and live in Canada. So this bogey has been used regularly, and this is the main business of Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, who is a lawyer by profession and does this type of work. So these guys go and do agitation, get their picture clicked, and I'm sure the intelligence agencies in Canada as well as in US, they put their name and addresses into their records, and this illegal migration or migration becomes legitimized. And we all know that many of the Punjabis, they have this swathe of false hope that they want to get settled in the Western countries. So they use this window. And the Gurdwaras in North America are being controlled by KCF and the other Khalistani outfits. Um, they use their Gurdwaras not only to mobilize money, but also keep this type of business alive. So they also control with this money, the music industry. So they also control with this money the movie industry, which is the soft power. Then they also keep this drug money and other things alive. And these guys eventually become either conduits or sympathizer or so they also keep this Khalistan bogey alive. that, oh, India is bad, since they worry about their legitimate residency proofs and residency documents. And sorry, what was your second question about the people profile? See, we don't know about them. There is no transparency about who all are the voters, who all want to come out and vote for this thing, because definition of Sikh is very complex. Many states, many countries, they try to define Sikhs, but that is also a very small segment of Sikhs. If we go back to Sikh history, people who keep beard and wear pagadi, or wear five essential elements of Sikhism, uh, you know, there is a segment of Sikhism which follows them as Sikhs. But this was the diktat given by the last Guru, 10th Guru. 9 gurus had their own philosophy, their own teaching process, their own ideology. So people like me, I don't keep beard, I don't keep my hair, but I follow Guru Nanak Dev. But am I less sick? You know, but neither the SGPC Gurdwaras here allow me to vote, nor does these referendum guys. So this is bit of farce activity which is going on, and I believe it's largely a media spectacle which these guys want to do. It doesn't have legs to hold.
Thank you, Anilesh. I think there is a lot of interest on the subject today. There are plenty of questions that have come from the audience. So
And
before I go to the
sir, I had a conversation with this guy Pannu sometimes back. So I asked him, what is the concept of Khalistan? What is he demanding for? Or his other friends who are demanding for. Their concept of Khalistan is also wrong. Like the gentleman was telling us, there is, when we go back into the history, Maharaja Ranjit Singh held territories largely in Pakistan. His expansion was towards Afghanistan, and his border with British was the Satluj River, which even this Malwa region of Punjab, which is Ludhiana and beyond, they were having different rulers. So even if they want to have Khalsa rule, and Maharaja Ranjit Singh was not a Sikh as per their own definitions, because he used to do Hindu rituals, and his court was run on a Persian script, and he used to use Persian language as a court language, and he used to do yajna, which is banned by many of these Khalistani elements. So Maharaja Ranjit Singh is only used as an icon. They want disturbance in India, and for all those reasons which I was telling you, it's largely the money element. So there is no
right.
ideology to hold on to.
Right. So before I ask the other questions that have come up, I'm going to post a link for anybody who's interested in joining future events of Law and Society Alliance or to associate yourself with our activities. Please click on that link and go and register yourself. We'll be more than happy to connect with you as soon as the event is over. So I've just posted the link for you to work on. So we'll move on to the next question. I think there is a question from one of our audience, Mr. Pushpa Kumar Lakshmanan. He has asked that, is there any official position of the Canadian government on the Khalistan issue? And also he says that if a nation has to protect the freedom of speech, there are limitations to the right, such as national security, international relations, etc. So I think it is addressed to Mr. Milewski. If you could just address that question, please.
It is a good question. The position of the Canadian government, as I said before, either liberal or conservative, has always been that Canada respects the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of India. And that answer is intended to end the discussion. We're not in favor of India being broken up into separate countries. And it means that we're not in favor of a Khalistan. But at the same time, governments of both parties have always also said that Sikhs in Canada have the right of freedom of speech and that's not going to be abridged. They will not be silenced. There is no crime that they have committed. There's no law that we can enforce that stops them saying Khalistan Zindabad. And the government would like to not get into a further discussion. They'd like to end the discussion there, and they'd rather not talk about the propensity of all political parties, I mean, here, including here the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the leftist New Democratic Party, which, as you know, is now in bed in a sort of coalition with the Liberal government in Canada. They all take the position that come election time, yeah, you're going to see us again hustling for votes at Gurdwaras with posters of gun-toting Khalistani martyrs. They don't want to talk about that. They want to keep going for those votes.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Milewski. There's one more question. I think again it is addressed to you. One of our participants, Ms. Aparna, wants to understand how the Canadian government brought justice to the victims of the Air India bombing. If you could just give her the perspective, please.
Okay, well, that's too long an answer for this forum because you're asking the person who had to sit through about a decade of sworn testimony, both in a series of criminal trials and then in a judicial inquiry. The main criminal trial was 4 years. The judicial inquiry was also about 4 years. I sat through it all. I had gigabytes of testimony on my hard drive, and you don't want to know. But I'll give you the short version. The short version is that the Canadian government and the justice system did not bring justice to the victims' families. Canada completely botched this case, both before the bombing, in its failure to prevent it, and after the bombing, in its failure to successfully prosecute all but one of the bombers. Before the bombing, there were detailed and specific warnings that were ignored, or wiretaps that were not, we didn't get around to having them translated, so, or we never listened to them. Translators notes describing, for example, Salvinda Parmar ordering the booking of the tickets that were used to check in the bombs. I mean, they had that on tape and erased it. So the translators notes, well, doesn't make good evidence in a court. I'll spare you the rest of it, but that's just one example. Another, it would be that Air India and the Indian government begged the RCMP, the Canadian Royal Canadian Mounted Police, to crack down on baggage security in the days before the bombing. They had received threats and more threats, a wave of threats. They said, look, we think these people are going to try to put bombs in luggage. We've got to have absolutely ironclad checks on all luggage, hand baggage, check baggage, everything. We've got to check on that. And the RCMP said, yeah, the Indians making complaints again. They just want more free security. And they didn't even pass it on. They didn't do anything about it. So those two examples, that's before the bombing. And then after the bombing, the problem was that the lackadaisical investigation, the balkanization of the various police agencies, the incompetence of the brand new Canadian Security Intelligence Service, which actually tailed two of the bombers, Parmar and his bomb maker Rayat, into the woods on Vancouver Island for a test bombing 3 weeks before the real thing. And when you start to comprehend the volume of evidence that they had before and after the bombing, and that Rayat, the bomb maker, was the only one ever convicted, it really forces you to admit that the short answer to your question is no, Canada did not. It's not really a question of how did Canada bring justice. Canada did not bring justice to the victims' families and still hasn't.
Thank you, Mr. Milewski. Usually, these days in particular, there's not much of a good opinion on journalists and also the amount of in-depth work that they do. Probably after this session, the opinion of most of the audiences and the YouTube channel watchers of Law and Society Alliance will change, and definitely change, because the amount of expertise on the subject that our two speakers have, it's immense. And I thank both of them for their time, for the wisdom that they have shared with us today, and for the presentations that they made, answering all our questions. But before we end our program, I just want to once again reiterate, this is a fantastic book written by Mr. Terry Milewski, Blood for Blood, 50 years of Global Khalistan Project. All those students, researchers and others who have joined today, please go and buy this book. It's very important. It's available on Amazon. I have posted the link to the Amazon link here on the chat box. You can go and take a look at it. And also I have posted two important reports on the Khalistan issue, one by Mr. Milewski himself for the McDonald-Laurier Institute, which is a Canada-based think tank, and the other one by Dr. Aparna Pandey for the Hudson Institute. Please go and click those links and read those reports, store them and refer to them quite often. It's very important that, as people who are interested in learning the truth, we go to these and refer to these important documentations that are one of the speakers today and others have done on the subject. And with that, I want to announce that we're going to be having another event next Saturday, which is the 12th of November. And we'll be discussing the ascension of Xi Jinping for the third time after the 20th Party Congress in China, and the impact that this 20th Party Congress's decisions and Xi Jinping's ascension to power for the third time will have both in the neighborhood and also within China. So we'll also look at the global perspective on the subject next week on Saturday. With that, I thank Mr. Terry Milewski for his time, wisdom, and also for participating at such an early morning from Canada, Ottawa. Thank you so much. You've been a great friend, and I really enjoyed reading this book. And thank you for this contribution. And I also thank Mr. Anilesh Mahajan for his time. We will engage with both of you again and again whenever we discuss this Khalistan question. And thank you very much. And I request you have a great day, Mr. Milewski, and all my friends from the Americas and Europe. Have a great day. You have a day ahead of you. And for all those from India and Asia, I wish all of you good night. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for the invitation.
With that, we come to the end of the program. I have left the links open so that participants who want to click it and check it out, I just leave it open so that you do it. Thanks very much. With this, we come to the end of the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.